Millions killed, sometimes with only a number to identify them. Men, women, and children now being buried in nameless mass graves. And the Israeli military says it's now opened an evacuation route from the Al-Shifa hospital. But Margaret, for many of the patients there in a critical condition, this is simply not possible.
Our Deborah Pata. CBS News producer Marwan Al-Ghul filed this report last night from Gaza.
In Gaza City, there are more and more severe suffering. It's a matter of die or life in Gaza City, as no enough food, no electricity, no fuel at all. But if I want to talk about Gaza City, I have to talk about Al-Shifa Hospital. This hospital contains 500 medical beds, but all occupied by injured people and sick as well. Displaced people live in the hospital and the courtyards. I had a call phone with Dr. Samir Al-Borsh, who told me that smell of deaths everywhere in the hospitals, as there are 100 dead bodies in the hospital, but they don't know where to bury those bodies, which attempted the administrations of the hospital to dig mass grave to bury the bodies over there. Dr. Samir said that the hospital and doctors cannot apply any services to the injured people, as no fuel, no electricity, and everything ran out.
It's producer Marwan Al-Ghul reporting from Gaza. Christos Christou is president of Doctors Without Borders International, and he joins us now from Rome. I understand many of your doctors are working at Al-Shifa Hospital, and said 2 infants died due to lack of electricity, the inability to keep incubators on. There are 40 premature babies who need to evacuate. Will the Israeli military help these children evacuate?
So far, we don't have any news about any coordinated action about evacuating at least these neonate patients. And we don't have any news about any proper evacuation. What we see are hundreds of patients that they have underwent surgery very soon and very recently, and now they cannot be just take and walk out of the hospital. And next to them, we have newborn babies that they needed, premature babies that they needed support. They were supposed to be in incubators. No incubator works this moment in Al-Shifa. And actually, Al-Shifa doesn't work. It's not functional anymore.
The Prime Minister of Israel has said there's no reason why we can't just take the patients out of the hospital. What's your response to that?
To evacuate the hospital, you need time. You need weeks. It's not within 24 hours. And we said that several times in the past also, that it takes a lot of good organization to evacuate the hospital. And next to this coordination, it takes also a ceasefire. We have reports that people trying to leave the hospital also have been shot down.
By who?
And we had also accidents, snipers, and we don't know what is happening also sometimes inside the hospital in several places where they are bombed. There are airstrikes in the hospitals as well.
The Israeli military denies attacking the hospital complex. I know it's a large complex, but they claim that Hamas, as you know, has a command center in that hospital. I realize you are speaking about very sensitive matters, but the lives of your staff are also in danger here. How does this get resolved?
First of all, we need to understand that this right moment inside hospitals are people in need, are patients, are children. Our children, we have this acronym, the WCNSF, Wounded Children of Non-Surviving Families. We have several families that they are there, and these are patients. We need to understand that we have to protect the hospitals. Any attack in the medical care at the moment is an attack in humanity.
But Israel's military is going to go at that hospital if it is indeed Hamas's command center. I'm sure you understand that. You say it would take weeks to get everyone out? Is there any planning?
There's no planning. Everyone now leaves. Even the health workers have been so overwhelmed and exhausted, and they're in a position at the moment that they cannot even offer anything. So yes, what seems more likely is not a proper evacuation, but it is a panic. It's a panic that will end up with rubbles.
Allowing fuel in has been a big sticking point for Israel, which worries that Hamas will get the fuel. You need the fuel to keep the generators on. Do you have any source of fuel to keep the electricity on, to keep these people alive?
At the moment, there's no fuel in the hospital, and we run out of fuel also in other hospitals. And I cannot speak on behalf of all the hospitals this right moment in Gaza. I know that there's no electricity, we didn't have connection in internet. All these testimonies that you get also from our colleagues, like Dr. Mohammed Obaid, before was from yesterday. We lost contact later at night. We don't know what is happening in this right moment. And we know since a long time that people do not have even access to drinkable water.
Mm-hmm. It is, I don't even have the words to respond to what you just laid out, doctor, but thank you. And we wish your doctors well, along with their patients.
Thank you, Margaret.
We're joined now by White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Jake, welcome back to the program. The fighting seems very intense in and around Gaza. Doctors Without Borders has called on the Israeli government to, quote, end its unrelenting assault on Gaza's health system. Does the U.S. believe that this is an accurate description of what's happening? Is the U.S. telling Israel not to hit hospitals?
Well, Margaret, without getting into intelligence information, we can just look at the open source reporting that Hamas is using hospitals as it uses many other civilian facilities for command and control, for weapons storage, to house its fighters. And this is a violation of the laws of war. That being said, Margaret, the United States does not want to see firefights in hospitals where innocent people, patients receiving medical care, are caught in the crossfire. And we've had active consultations with the Israeli Defense Forces on this. In fact, just yesterday, the Israeli Defense Forces themselves said that they, on the record publicly, said that they are looking for ways to be able to ensure the safety and security of individual patients in those hospitals, while they also try to figure out a way to deal with the fact that Hamas is operating in a way that's outside the bounds of any civilized concept of how you would think about using a hospital, using human shields. So it's an active conversation, but the bottom line is we don't want to see firefights in hospitals.
Okay. You don't dispute then the Israeli assertion that Hamas has a command center underneath Al-Shifa Hospital?
I'm not going to get into a specific assertion related to a specific hospital because that would be getting into intelligence matters. But broadly speaking, we can see from open source reporting that there is a track record, a pattern of Hamas historically and in this conflict using hospitals and other civilian facilities for these purposes.
I want to ask you about the hostages, roughly 240 still being held by Hamas. We had the opportunity to speak with Congressman Mike McCall from Israel, where he had just met with the Israeli Prime Minister, and he told us that Israel is considering Hamas's proposal that Israel release Palestinian women and children from prison in order to obtain the hostages held by Hamas. Is that something the U.S. thinks should happen?
Well, Margaret, you'll understand if I'm very careful in how I answer this question because the negotiations are delicate, they're high stakes. What is at stake is the recovery of a significant number of innocent people, including innocent Americans currently being held hostage by Hamas, a murderous terrorist organization. It is the case that there are active negotiations underway between Israel and Qatar, who is communicating with Hamas, and the United States is involved in those discussions, very much involved in those discussions. But I'm not going to get into the specifics of what's on the table, only to say that we are actively working to ensure the safe return of every American being held hostage and every other person being held hostage by Hamas.
There are still roughly 400 Americans stuck in Gaza, according to the State Department. Will they get out?
We are determined to ensure that they get out. Many have gotten out. Many are still there, as you mentioned, not just American citizens, but also their immediate family members. And we're trying to create a circumstance where every one of them can get safe passage out of Gaza. The gate has been open and closed. The lists have included Americans some days and not other days, but the bottom line is today the gate is open. We are moving American citizens and their family members out, and in the days ahead, we hope to ensure that every American who wants to leave Gaza is able to do so safely.
Jake, this past week, a top State Department official testified to Congress that the Gaza Health Ministry's estimates of 11,000 Palestinian dead may in fact be an undercount. Does the White House share that assessment?
We don't have fidelity on the numbers of casualties, fatalities in Gaza. We don't know how many are fighters and how many are innocent civilians. But as I have said before, and as Secretary Blinken has said before, we do know there are thousands of innocent civilians who have been killed in the military operations that began after October 7th. And every loss of life of an innocent person, whether it's Palestinian, Israeli, anyone, is an absolute tragedy. And we grieve for every one of those lives. And we continue to reinforce the proposition that Israel has the right, indeed the responsibility, to go after Hamas, who continues to represent a threat to the state of Israel, but it must do so in a way that's consistent with the laws of war.
And Secretary Blinken also said too many Palestinians had died to date. I want to zero in on the future, which I know you have talked about from day one, what will happen in Gaza next. And you've pressed the Israeli government on this point. Secretary Blinken has been clear that it's the West Bank and Gaza that need to be under unified control, and the Palestinian Authority likely to govern that. It doesn't sound like the Netanyahu government is on the same page as the Biden administration, because the prime minister said something very different just yesterday.
Well, from our perspective, the way forward, the basic principles of the way forward are straightforward. And this is something that Secretary Blinken laid out publicly this past week. No reoccupation of Gaza, no forcible displacement of the Palestinian people. Gaza can never be used as a base for terrorism in the future, and Gaza's territory should not be reduced. Secretary Blinken also said that ultimately we do want to see the reconnection, the reunification of control between the West Bank and Gaza under Palestinian leadership. The Palestinian Authority is the current leadership on the West Bank. But ultimately, it's going to be up to the Palestinian people to decide their future, who governs them.
There haven't been elections held in ages.
Support a process. Well, that's right, Margaret. There haven't been elections held since the early 2000s. But post-October 7th, we can't go back to the way things were on October 6th. Mm-hmm. And that goes for ensuring that Hamas cannot represent a continuing threat to Israel. And in fact, Hamas spokespeople have said they want to repeat October 7th again and again until Israel is wiped out, that they want to be in a permanent state of war with Israel. That was on the front page of the New York Times out of the mouth of a Hamas spokesman. So Israel is going to prosecute this campaign against a terrorist group, but we also can't go back to October 6th when it comes to governance. Yeah. And it will ultimately be up to, or should be up to, the Palestinian people to decide what their future governance looks like, and that should involve a reconnection, as Secretary Blinken has said, of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
Jake Sullivan, thank you for your time. Face the Nation will be back in 1 minute. Stay with us.
There's challenges.
That is a very, very touchy, hairy situation over there right now, and it's gruesome. War is not a glorious, glamorous thing. It never has been, and it never will be.
Back now, the Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman, Mark Warner.
It's just a horrible, horrible, bad deal. It's a bad deal for all of them over there. And I really hate to see this escalating, but you know what? The Bible's going to be fulfilled regardless whether we want it to or not, pertaining to the prophecies. So this may just be the beginning chain of events that we're all going to have to become accustomed to watching and looking at on TV.
the state of Virginia. And the Democrats were celebrating what happened in Virginia this past week.
I don't care nothing about listening to this. It's politics. Raw politics. Just like Donald Trump and all that other stuff keeps coming up on the news. I realize, people has...
calling for a ceasefire in the
I realize people has made, they put it in stakes pertaining to...
yesterday.
Pertaining to what side if they wanted to be on, who they wanted to represent. But whenever it gets to the point that politics is more important than the people, then there's a problem. Especially the way that this country over here wants to politicize everything. Everything.
Yesterday, more than 300,000 pro-Palestinian protesters marched through central London, calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
300,000. Imagine that. 300,000 people. That's like, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. That would be like Jackson, Tennessee, and all of Madison County, and probably Gibson County, and Obion and Weakley County. Everybody consistently in one area at one time, to just give my viewers an idea in how many people 300,000 people is. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of people. And I'm pretty sure that those people are like us. They can foresee that if this thing continues on the path that it's on, it's only going to lead to more devastation and more horrendous, horrible events that usually always follow after one event. Usually demands for another event. It demands for another event. It's just like a cancer. Just like a cancer that I knew that my niece up in Chicago that got involved with Jerry Springer back in the 90s, the way that society was turning ugly, that we was in big trouble. And now, 30 years later, it's coming out. It's coming out, and I just don't know where the end game to all this is going to be. Especially whenever you have various people, very powerful people, like the oil petroleum tycoons that done what they done in the year 2022 towards wreaking all kinds of profits like they've never seen before. And then whenever you have idiots like over in the Russian government that's basically started this ball of wax towards breaking all kinds of Geneva Agreement war regulations. And then we had the January uprising here in America, January 6th uprising. And one thing feeds to another thing, and another thing feeds off another thing, and it just turns into a masquerade. And I still say, and I'll always believe, that these are the forces of evil that's coming down in great wrath, because it knows its time is short, and it would be absolutely grotesque in watching Lucifer shake his fist in front of God and say, "Now look what I've done. I've caused the human race to basically destroy themselves, either out of sickness or greed or just plain hatred in general." It would be grotesque, because that's exactly what Satan is out to do. He's out to kill, steal, and destroy. He's the author of confusion. And as far as I'm concerned, we should not be experiencing, seeing, and witnessing what we are seeing, witnessing, and not only over there pertaining to the grotesque war, but also over here in America and all throughout Ukraine and other parts of the world. This should not have come to this point. But I've come to the conclusion that there's certain people that could give a damn less about justice, or could give a damn less about a true confession of guilt, and they would rather take all of this to their graves, knowing that it could have been prevented. But I'm convinced that these people could care less about other people's benefits or other people's well-being, much less other people's souls. And I'm talking about people that goes to church, and I'm talking about the brotherhood, the brother-sisterhood in Christ that's supposed to care about other people's feelings and other people's emotions and other people's souls. You don't think that there's going to be a hotbed in hell for people that have allowed for this to get this far out of hand? Sure it will be. Sure it will be, especially those that have violated the principles towards doing what they have done out here on this property, or just totally ignoring the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions altogether, thinking that all this was just going to up and go away. You don't think that all those people are going to give an account for all this? Sure they will. People has lost the fear of God. People has lost the respect of God. And I truly believe that God basically looked down, and I've used this expression before, God looked down at Lucifer and said, do your job. Do your job. In other words, at that point in time, God realized that humanity had already bitten the hand that was trying to feed them toward being too good for their own good. And now, basically, the hounds of hell has been leashed upon to society, upon to the planet. The hounds of hell.
For people who love their vehicles,
that is pretty intense.
only at
Stupid commercials.
Iran is financing Hamas and Hezbollah in the Middle East. Are they operating in America too?
Is the threat against you ongoing?
60 Minutes tonight on CBS.
We aim every...
Wow.
You're watching KFBS 12, the Heartland's news channel.
And you know, that's the thing. Whenever somebody like me sticks his neck out, I become very, very vulnerable in not just the locals, but in exchange student programs, colleges, whatever. Once they find out who I am and what I stand for, pertaining to the Lord Jesus Christ, I automatically become a target. Not on a local level towards aggravation type terrorism, the way that they was hunting us and tormenting our lives here on this property, but then I become even a bigger vulnerable threat pertaining to outsiders targeting this property or targeting me. So, I mean, people can laugh all they want. They can take this nonchalantly all they want. But whenever people are literally dying and putting their lives on the line, I promise you, none of this is nonchalantly or should be taken nonchalantly in any form or fashion, beginning in 1988, whenever the 9 tapes first circulated to the White House.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. You, in your position as head of the Intelligence Committee, have been tracking a lot of the competition with China, particularly in the technology space. The White House seems to be very focused on reestablishing military-to-military ties with China. What are you watching for out of this summit with Xi Jinping?
Well, I do think reestablishing these military ties and communications are important, because we saw when we shot down the Chinese balloon, nobody picked up the phone on the other end. And unlike Russia, where we've had 75 years of conflicts, but lots of back channel communications, because our contest with China is newer, we don't have that level of communication. So I think that's very important to be reestablished. I also think the president needs to push President Xi on the continuing intellectual property theft that some years accounts for close to $500 billion of intellectual property being stolen. And I firmly believe, when we've seen no retreat from China in terms of its level of technology investment, I absolutely believe that national security in the 21st century is more than tanks and guns. It is who wins the battle for artificial intelligence and quantum computing and advanced energy. The level of Chinese investment, for example, on rare earth minerals coming out of Africa is huge. And we need to be able to counter that with America and with our friends.
So you want guardrails, I imagine, set up with China on artificial intelligence and the like, but legislating around a lot of this is really hard and it's not moving very quickly.
Now, Margaret, let me tell you, I did the bill that was terribly bipartisan, 13 Democrats, Republicans, about saying we need an approach that's not simply focused on TikTok, but on all foreign technology that might pose a national security risk from China or Russia or Iran. And suddenly we had the extremes on both the left and the right come out against that legislation. It needs to move because particularly now, as you see, literally 40% of young people get all their news from TikTok. So I hope those kind of issues we can get some energy behind them now coming after this summit. But this technology competition, we've had military competitors like Russia. We've never had an economy that's making the investments the way China is in these new technology domains.
So Microsoft this week came out with a report that said Russia, Iran, and China will interfere in the 2024 presidential race. They were certain about this, and other close presidential races worldwide. Is your legislation going to stop something like that?
I think our legislation will take on an issue like a TikTok, which is, I am afraid, could be used as a propaganda channel for the CCP, the Communist Party of China. And my beef is with the CCP, it's not with the Chinese people or the Chinese diaspora. But around artificial intelligence, I think we need to be humble, because candidly, we've done nothing on any guardrails on social media and on technology writ large. The two areas where artificial intelligence could have an enormous negative effect tomorrow is interfering in our public elections, but it also could have a tool in terms of interfering in our public markets. And I've been surprised we've not seen more manipulation, for example, of stocks using AI tools. So my hope is perhaps we can get a coalition between those who favor making sure our public markets are not interfered with, as well as those who are concerned about interference in our elections, to build the kind of coalition. Because taking on big tech, I've been there for years and got a pretty much a zero record, and nobody in Congress has got a good record on this. I think we need that kind of coalition, because the election interference could be enormous.
Very quickly, is that Washington Post report that Ukraine was behind the attack on Nord Stream accurate, and is attacking civilian infrastructure acceptable?
Margaret, I'm not going to comment on anything that comes out of classified intelligence. We do know that Russia has a history of misinformation and disinformation, but we'll continue to follow that issue.
Senator, thank you for your time today. And we spoke earlier today with the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul from Tel Aviv. I know you're wrapping up what has been a pretty quick and busy trip to Israel. You met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Did you get a sense that his government is close to wrapping up this military operation?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, the airstrikes. I think the ground game is just now starting. And I will say, Margaret, when we walked in, the first thing we saw was the horrific Hamas video showing the gruesome killings of these barbaric terrorists. And it was a very intense, kind of powerful moment. The Prime Minister was in tears, really teary-eyed about what happened. And remember, this is sort of like their 9/11, and they want to eliminate the threat, as they should. And I think we talked a lot about the ground game, operations humanitarian, and we also met with the Minister of Defense as well.
Mm-hmm. And you just raised humanitarian aid. I know the U.S. is the largest donor to the UN relief agency that operates inside of Gaza. Many in the Republican caucus do not support any aid going to them or to Palestinians, even Palestinian civilians living in Gaza. Do you believe that the aid package going through Congress needs to include this kind of help?
Well, I do, and I think the Israelis do as well. I think, I talked about this with the Prime Minister. They have put a buffer zone in the middle of Gaza to create this humanitarian zone in southern Gaza. They opened up the Rafah Gate, that's Egypt. About 100 trucks a day are coming in, but it has to be like food, water, and medicine. It can't be fuel, because Hamas can use that to light their tunnels and operate them.
There are still roughly 400 Americans stuck inside of Gaza, according to the State Department. Did you get any update on how they're doing?
We did, in very sensitive negotiations with the Qataris. They're kind of the lead broker, if you will, of this negotiation. I'm meeting right after this interview with a bunch of families of the hostages, and I met with them in the United States. Very dicey issue. And I think what Hamas wants would be a swap of prisoners in Israel, Palestinians, in exchange for these hostages, both Americans and Palestinians in the Gaza. That's an ongoing thing. I hope it can happen. A ceasefire would be very difficult without an agreement to release all hostages.
But to be clear, are the Palestinian Americans who are trapped in Gaza being included in that hostage negotiation? Is that what you're saying as well?
No, I'm sorry. It's the Palestinians in prison in Israel that are being negotiated in exchange for prisoners of both Israelis and Americans held captive in Gaza.
Understood. So that Hamas proposal is being entertained. Interesting to know that. I want to ask you about what Congress can deliver in terms of aid to Israel. Do you think that the new Speaker of the House has the clout necessary with your caucus to move through a package that includes Israel aid, Ukraine aid, and other national security items?
Our aid to Israel is urgent and times of the essence. We have to deliver this package. Now, I know that we have offsets, and that's fair, but I don't think we can play political games with this to support our ally, because, if they fail and we fail, it would have a very bad effect across the Middle East. Into Ukraine, that's vitally important as well. Mm-hmm. So is Taiwan. And so is the last line of defense, the southern border. So really, if you think about it, all these threats are really tied together. Now, whether we handle it all together or separately with, say, Ukrainian border security, all that has yet to be figured out. The stage 2, if you will, CR that the Speaker is trying to implement, I think will actually move the process forward.
Well, that deadline in terms of government funding is next week, November 17th. Yesterday, the Speaker made this proposal. It's kind of an unusual way to do it, called a laddered short-term funding deal. The White House says it's just not serious and it's a waste of time. Are we going to see a government shutdown?
Well, we have the power of the purse, and look, we need more time. The CRs always hurt the military, always hurt our national security. And so the first CR until January could resolve the last four appropriations bills that we can't pass to date. So we could pass those and then have until February to negotiate with the Senate to get this done and put it on the president's
Right, but
desk.
first you need the votes
That
to
will
actually
also give us
pass
time.
this. So can Republicans vote together to pass this proposal, this short-term funding agreement?
We're going to have to. I mean, there's no choice here. I mean, the world is on fire from where I sit. It is too, urgent. We can't sit back and do nothing. And talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu, they needed this yesterday, in his words. Ukraine needed it yesterday. The border, for certainly, needed it yesterday. We know that Chairman Xi is threatening Taiwan and the Pacific.
Yeah.
So, I think what the Senate's going to do, they're going to come up with a package probably after Thanksgiving that they will send over to the House.
Right. And we'll see if that government funding proposal can get passed by next week to avoid that shutdown. Congressman, thank you for joining us from Israel this morning. We'll be right back.
At first, just leaving the house was hard.
It's it's a situation that's growing intensely out of hand. And as I was talking about a while ago, Hamas has got sleeper cells right here in America. Besides that, we have so many foreigners over here in America that, we think that their intent was good. We would like to believe that their intent was good towards ever coming to America to begin with. But who's to say that this thing couldn't turn into just a massive free-for-all right here in the United States, because we have basically set ourselves up in being vulnerable on every level imaginable. And I'm just gonna kick this in there real quick. This morning, Donald Trump put out some sort of an article with flames coming out, smoke and flames coming out of the White House, and he made a remark that I'm going to have to go back and straighten out this mess. Now, the media took that as a threat, and I can understand their perspective of saying that and interpreting that way. But I don't think that Donald Trump put that out as a threat. He put that out as a warning that the direction that the American government is heading right now, especially talking about a shutdown, $33 trillion in debt, all these illegal immigrants that's over here, not counting all the other people from all these other different countries that's over here. We have reached a pivotal point, my friends, from a national security standpoint, that things could get very, very hairy, very, very quick. And I really hate to see it come to all this, because it all could have been prevented. Good luck to us all, right? Good luck to us all.
Isaac Herzog, who joins us from Jerusalem. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good morning, Margaret.
Your country lost 1,200 of its civilian citizens on October the 7th, and I know you're still reeling from that. But what we're seeing in Gaza right now with Hamas and this concentration of very intense fighting around Al-Shifa hospital, if that is indeed Hamas's command center, does that mean this war ends if you take control of it?
Well, the war we've taken on against Hamas is a war which matters to the entire well-being and safety of the world, I would say. And therefore, our main aim at this stage, following the atrocities we've gone through on October 7th, is to uproot the capability of Hamas. It doesn't end in Shifa Hospital. They're based all throughout Gaza.
I know you have personally met with many of the families of the roughly 240 hostages being held by Hamas and other terror groups. Can you explain why Israel is reportedly now considering releasing Palestinian women and children from your prisons in exchange for some of these hostages held by Hamas?
What I'm saying is this. You can look at what's been going on with Ukraine now for the past couple of years towards it being nothing more than evil. Blowing up innocent lives, not caring about civilian life. Now you look at this. This is on a bigger scale. Our media is covering it more so now than what it well, I don't know. It's probably equal to what they was covering it with the Ukraine deal. But the bottom line is evil is rising up or coming down, whichever way you want to look at it, to the magnitude of seeing great distress upon to the land. These are the very teachings that Jesus Christ talked about that would happen in the last days. But also you got to keep in mind that we have evil right here. We have evil right here in our own nation of people that basically worships an occult figures that could care less about the Lord Jesus Christ and the Lord Jesus Christ teachings, that basically are satanic worshipers all around us. All around us. So whenever the Bible talks about that the true worshipers will be encamped by their enemies all around, that's where we're at.
Of some of the hostages, we demand all the hostages. That's the worldwide demand. But there are talks, of course, behind the scenes. I cannot confirm any details. What I can say is that there's nothing substantial right now on the table. The United States is also heavily involved in this, so there's nothing tangible that I can report.
I ask because in the past, Israel has flatly refused that Hamas proposal to release Palestinians from prison. Are you saying that's a false report?
It's not the same. It's not the same. The report doesn't say that Israel is willing to release murderers who are sentenced for life sentence. In my speech in Congress to a joint session of the House in July, mid-July, I said that the entire problem with the peace process in the region is terror. Terror is undermining the entire ability to move forward. All of those who remember decades of trying to make peace with our neighbors know that we can make peace with those who adhere to the agreements and fight terror. Unfortunately, a nation which supports and hails terror cannot be a partner, and we've seen the atrocious result.
I understand, and the United States of America considers Hamas to be a terrorist organization and has for decades. They're very clear on that. But as you just mentioned, you have long been an advocate for peace with the Palestinians. But there are many in the current government who before October 7th were not and do not favor 2 states for 2 people. Do you still believe that is the way ultimately to have peace?
Why would anybody agree right now to any progress with our neighbors when we don't see truly their ability to fight terror? And many of them, including those in Gaza, are hailing and smiling and celebrating in the most atrocious way the world's greatest atrocity almost since World War II. May I also add and tell you that part of the whole issue is that it's kind of a culture that celebrates these awful atrocities. These atrocities cannot be accepted in any way. It means it has nothing to do with the conflict. It has nothing to do with the borders, with settlements or anything. This is simple, clear barbarism, Jew hate, other hate, which is advocated by ISIS, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, which if we weren't here, then Europe will be next, and probably the United States is the end game for all of them.
I understand, and I'm not discounting in any way anti-Semitism around the globe, which is on the rise. When it comes specifically, though, to the long-term security of the democratic and Jewish state of Israel, it sounds like you have lost some hope for that peace process. But I wonder, given what you are seeing happen in Gaza right now, and the wish you have for security for your people, aren't you concerned that more individuals will be radicalized by the level of civilian casualties right now?
If we eradicate the capabilities of Hamas, we'll give hope to the Palestinians in Gaza too, to run their life decently, as we've expected in the accords we had with the Palestinians. We enabled the Palestinian Authority to take control of Gaza, and they lost it. They lost it to a brutal coup of Hamas in 2007. But the issue is, I kept on asking President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority on numerous occasions, would you go in if Israel takes Hamas out? And he said no. Now I don't know exactly where he's at and if they're even capable of doing so. But one thing is clear. We first and foremost have to give safety and security to Israel.
Understood. Even the United States government says that death toll of 11,000 Palestinians may be an undercount. They say they can't separate civilians from Hamas fighters, but it's still a tremendous amount of death. So given that, how can you say with certainty that Israel's military and intelligence is hitting the right targets right now, that the dying that is happening is necessary and helpful to your security?
I thank you for this question. First of all, because I want to express my utter pain and sorrow for any innocent casualty on the Palestinian side. We are doing our utmost according to international humanitarian law. First and foremost, we alert people. Well, I mean, what's the story here? The enemy, these terrorists, fought and tried to kill us and send missiles and terrorists from their homes. So we have to go to these homes and we have to blow up all their infrastructure, tunnel, missiles, everything. So we go and we send leaflets, and we call and we phone and we send text messages to all the civilians in that area. We tell them move out, we give them time to move out, and we've opened humanitarian corridors, and we have increased dramatically the humanitarian aid to those who are moving out to a safety zone. Unfortunately, there could be casualties. Some of them are also by Hamas fire, and the reporting and the numbers are unclear to me. But I'm saying outright, we are doing our best. Unfortunately, these things happen, and we are sorry for it. But at the end of the day, we have to uproot that infrastructure because we have to defend ourselves according to our right and duty to defend our people.
President Herzog, thank you for your time. We'll be back in a moment.
Starting tomorrow.
You know, I made mention a few years ago, since I've been basically making all these videos and stuff, of the fact of what king going to war with another king setteth not down first and consulteth his losses. That war front that I was talking about was not just one-sided, but it's two-sided. And don't think for a second that these demonic evil demons that's roaming around inside these people, regardless whether it be in Chicago or right in the urban country areas or in another part of the world, don't think that they don't know that. Don't underestimate your enemy. I was trying to tell my son that yesterday, that people are going to be fascinated about people like us. They're going to be fascinated, or that's the impression that they're going to give. And I said it's not any different than what you was whenever you was just a little kid and you was wanting to open up something and see how it operated. You was fascinated by it. You wanted to open it up and see how it ticked. Okay? You was fascinated. Well, people are going to be fascinated to the Christian society for one or two reasons. They're either going to be fascinated about them towards wanting to join up with them, towards joining ranks and being partners with them, partnering up with the Christians, or they're going to be fascinated in the fact of seeing them even be that much more of an enemy towards trying to trick you and trap you. I could go on and on and on about the warfare, the spiritual warfare that goes on every day that I'm seeing God's people suffer on account of bad spiritual leadership, because people should have seen all this coming, especially our spiritual leaders should have seen all this coming back 25, 30 years ago. They should have seen it coming.
State legislature in Virginia. But there was another notable outcome. Liberals won a series of school board races in red and blue states alike. Why? Here's Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes.
When election season rolls around...
We're getting back into politics again. I'm not interested so much in politics other than it being a smokescreen of a diversion that's taken us off the areas that we should be applying our minds and our thoughts towards.
Service members were killed yesterday in an aircraft training mission.
Let's back up. Let's get all this. Hold it.
Or call or text 573-482-2711.
Don't care about that
Today,
neither.
some tragic breaking news. The Pentagon has just announced that 5 U.S. service members were killed yesterday in an aircraft training mission in the Mediterranean Sea. Our condolences to those families and our deepest respect and thanks for all of those who serve or have served in the military.
Yes.
Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.
Iran is financing Hamas and Hezbollah in the Middle East. Are they operating in America too?
Is the threat against you ongoing?
60 Minutes tonight on CBS.
I wake up every morning asking what's happening.
If there's ever been a time.
You know, I've enjoyed the times I've had to talk with him over the years and spend some time with him. Of course, there's a long history between President Carter and Ebenezer Baptist Church.
A remarkable man. Does it bother you that the evangelical community seems to continue to very much be behind Donald Trump? Is that surprising?
It's a deep contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I've said this before. Society has been asleep at the wheel. They have put their trust in our politicians towards putting this thing on autopilot, our crews, and now society is waking up. And they're understanding and identifying that our politicians has led us down this road of doom and gloom, being $33 trillion in debt. Over 2 million illegal immigrants comes over the border on average every year, and that's just the ones that we know about. I don't even know that that's even an accurate amount. That may be a very, very conservative amount. We are under siege. Donald Trump seen this, and that was the primary purpose, that he wanted to put up a wall. I've never seen so much confusion here in America, but at the same token, I can see where people are realizing that our government has, in fact, failed us. I mean, that's pretty obvious whenever you have all the gun violence that's going on in our streets right now, to the point that various investigators, federal agents, Homeland Security, U.S. Marshals, FBI, whoever, have been focusing more on people like me, thinking that I was the bad guy, because something within them was targeting me, even though I'd never done nothing to them. And it all began with what Homeland Security put out in Wheeling, West Virginia, of the ordeal that I went through, that I never should have had to have gone through, especially with me documenting the conversation. Word for word, verbatim, on a mini cassette tape player. My attorney played that at the court. The explanation that the 911 dispatcher gave, well, it must have been faulty equipment, Your Honor. It was a setup coming from Homeland Security on the federal level, from the Bushes, old man Bush. This guy here, we want to stain him. We want to make him look as horrifying as we can. And if we can't make him look insane, let's make him look like a monster, like he's out to kill or destroy the American people, towards being a homegrown terrorist. I have dealt with this entity now since those 9 tapes went to the White House, and since I put the apocalypse model, the 4 horsemen, in the back end of my truck back then, and driving around and getting all this rejection. Not just unsupporters, but actually being attacked. It wasn't just that I was being attacked right here in Northwest Tennessee whenever I come back here in 2014. You better look at all my profiles towards where I've been and what's went on in my life, from Kentucky to Oklahoma to Atlanta, Georgia. being attacked by various independent auto facility places, regardless whether it was in let me get my facts right. Phoenix, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, California, Northern California, Stockton, California, up in that area. Just attacks. I could not believe how that the spirit world was coming literally out of the internet. Especially whenever I come back from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 2009, and I wound up in Kentucky, and my dad tried to kill me right here on this property, right here on the porch here with an axe, with a machete. Whenever I went down to Memphis, there was literal spirits that was coming out of the internet that was targeting me, that within a 72-hour period of me going down to Memphis, I had already been questioned or put in the back end of a squad car on 3 different times. My son, at the time, was living in Millington. We agreed to meet at a restaurant, a little Mexican restaurant outside of Memphis, Covington area. And he wasn't stupid. He wasn't blind. He knew the things that was going on in my life, and he said, "Dad, you're absolutely right. If you don't get the hell out of here, they're going to get you." And he wasn't necessarily talking from a fleshly perspective, but a spiritual perspective. That's whenever I left Tennessee and I went down to Douglasville, Georgia, which is basically in the metro Atlanta area. And I met up with a guy that was a good guy that had been living in Atlanta all his life, that felt like that the walls had caved in on him too as well because of all the people that had moved into Atlanta and basically invaded his own property. He got to the point that he couldn't even have dogs on his own property. But anyways, while I was there, I went ahead and rented out a rental. And I've got receipts of all this stuff. Whenever I talk about my story, I can back it up. Went to Atlanta, rented out a spot. That way I could keep my trailer where it was supposed to have been, because it's difficult to drive in the city if you got a trailer in the back of your truck versus not having one. And then on the 4th of July, Independence Day, I decided to go down to downtown Atlanta and watch the firework display. I was immediately engaged with SWAT, Homeland Security. I barely had enough time to get into the area and park my vehicle. I think I paid like $8, maybe $10 for a parking area. And I was right there by the park where they shoot out all the major fireworks there in Atlanta. Cinnamon Park, or whatever they call it. Cinnamon Park, or whatever it was. And I was literally attacked by about 10 different officers that come out of nowhere. I was obtained, not arrested, while they searched my truck with dogs and mirrors and all this other stuff, all kinds of different detective devices. And they was threatening to take all my tools, because at the time I hadn't landed a job yet. I did later on. I landed a job working for Gerber Collision and Glass there in Kennesaw. But they was threatening to take all my tools and basically throw them out on the parking lot and then walk away and leave them. And that was my livelihood. That was my complete, total livelihood. That was the only thing that I was surviving out there on the streets with, because I did not have backers. I didn't have a church. I didn't have supporters. I didn't have nothing. Even Miss Bobby Sue in Nashville, Tennessee, by this time had already turned her back on me towards giving me the cold shoulder because of what Homeland Security had done, going into her house, picking up her phone, and acting like that they was tampering around with it. And as far as I'm concerned, they may have been. I don't know. I know that she said that there was 2 individuals that come to her house knocking on the door wearing suits and ties, questioning her about me. And from then on, she was leery about me, and I can understand why that she was leery about me, because basically that relationship was basically spoiled that me and her had. Even though it was an atomic relationship, we were just friends. You know, if somebody knocks on your door and starts questioning you about an acquaintance that you have with somebody, odds are you're probably going to steer clear from that acquaintance, unless it's a really, 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 really good acquaintance of some sort. Like maybe it's a distant cousin or something. Or maybe you owe that person something. But she steered clear. She gave me the cold shoulder from then on. So I knew then, me being out there on the road, going from city to city, from state to state, from place to place, basically being a storm chaser, following after the catastrophes that was going on, because that's where I knew that the money was, especially after the 2008 bubble burst that happened, and things really, really got really, really tight in America, to the point that gas went up to about $5 a gallon right here in Tennessee and Kentucky. And I took great notice while I was out there in the field that the areas that I was more prone of surviving in was either going to be around military bases where the money was still flowing, or colleges. All these other places was suffering. They was suffering tremendously after the bubble burst in 2008 leading into 2009. So I had to use a great deal of street common sense just to be able to survive, because I know that I didn't have backers. I didn't have a church group that was backing me or supporting me. A matter of fact, it was the church group that turned against me. The very church group. And the whole time, we're talking about Bible prophecy. The whole time, the founder of the ministry's been preaching a message of peace and utopia. They didn't want peace. They didn't want a true, godly, authentic, Holy Ghost anointed peace. That's my point that I continue to keep making about all this mess that now we're in 30 plus years later. I've never seen a society so mixed up and confused, so deranged. And now we're reaping the consequences on account of it. And of course, to think that whenever I come back here, I was getting the blame for everything, including my brother's death. It was just one of the most appalling, sickening, horrendous events that I think that I've ever had to encounter, that I told my son about yesterday. I said, you know, if I would have known, first of all, that there would have been an established, an occult group less than a half a mile from my house, I probably wouldn't have come back here, because I'm very familiar with that occult group, in how that they believe and what kind of people that comes out of that occult group. I'm not saying that they're all bad, but I'm saying that I'm familiar with the ones that are, because I stayed with them up in MCC in downtown Chicago for probably about 6 weeks or a month before I figured out who he was and what his charges was. But if I was not already allotted my disability towards having to rely on other body shops around here for my survival, I wouldn't have come back here neither. You know why? Because I know how they are around here. They work in basically secret communications, to the point that if they get ready to boycott you, you don't have a snowball chance in hell in surviving, especially in today's world with all the internets and all the social media out there. And I know that if I come back here, I know that there was already some harsh feelings about me in this area. I didn't know how harsh until I actually come back in 2014. But I told my son, I said, I never would have come back here, because I know that I wouldn't have had a snowball chance in hell of surviving, relying upon all these different body shops, regardless whether it was the body shops in Union City, the body shops in Martin, the body shops in Dresden, the body shops in Milan, the body shops in Jackson, Tennessee, or the body shops in Dyersburg. I'd have probably had to have driven who knows where. And rather than me working for a top-notch body shop, I would have had to settle towards working for a back alley body shop, somebody like a Julio body shop. And whenever you're working for people like that, you don't get no benefits. And besides that, you don't know from one week to another whether or not the money's going to be there after you get through putting out the labor. I've actually run into a couple situations, not many, fortunately, to where I had people trying to beat me out of money. It's incredible how far that this thing has gotten out of hand. And our politicians and our preachers, our spiritual leaders, have still not come clean. And, you know, I'm sitting here watching basically a runaway train, and a lot of people are too as well, just like Donald Trump supporters. And that's probably the reason why that Donald Trump has such of a strong base, is because people are no longer stupid. People are no longer ignorant of the fact of how that these judges and politicians and senators and congressmen and all these other people, as well as the preachers, have bamboozled them. They're on to them. So as of right now, I don't know that Donald Trump could actually say or do anything other than maybe possibly breaking the law very, very severely that would eliminate him towards possibly being the next president of the United States. Hey, you brought it upon to yourselves. These churches and these politicians that thought that they was going to play games with not only God, but God's people. You brought this upon to yourselves. You have no one to blame but yourselves. And I know whenever you hear people like me or Donald Trump, it just irritates you to death. But the media has been in behind, not all of them, but a great deal of them has been in behind all of this, that once more has led us down this path of doom and gloom that is now facing not just the American people, but the world. Whenever it talks about in the Bible that it was as the noise of thunder pertaining to the opening of the first seal, that one of the beasts that was in heaven come running to the edge of the kingdom of God and looked down at planet Earth and heard this great ushering noise that was coming out of the planet. Now you're beginning to hear the beginning phases of the noise of thunder. This is all Bible prophecy coming true in Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. For it was as, didn't say it was thunder, it was as the noise of thunder. Just like whenever you go over into the first part of Revelations, it talks about one as like unto the Son of Man. That's down here around the seven candlesticks. But it also talks about that the Lord Jesus Christ will remove that candlestick if thou don't repent and go back and do thy first works over again. People think that this is some sort of a joke, some sort of a fluke or something. I don't know. They have been so patronized for so many years, and so many of them has basically watered down the gospel, and all of a sudden whenever somebody like me comes on board, oh, he's a Jim Jones, or oh no, he's not a Jim Jones, he's a Timothy McVeigh, he's a Unabomber, he's a this, he's a that, he's a this, he's a that. Everybody wants to compartmentalize everybody. Everybody wants to profile everybody like they're all professionals. And the thing about it is, it's the professionals that has put us in the situation that we're in right now, that we're seeing now exploding all over all 7 continents. And if we're not smart enough to identify our enemy and underestimating our enemy, I promise you, you ain't seen nothing yet compared to what you're going to see. And the thing about it is, it could go to the next level in less than 72 hours. Before the next 72 hours passes, before the next 3 days goes away, we could wake up to where every major financial institution in America and all throughout the planet have basically declared bankruptcy upon to themselves and basically defaulted on all their loans and demanded for all their citizens their whatever money that they've hiding and stowed away, and the ones that's been rat packs towards packing all their money away towards getting rich for the past 25 or 30 years, that all that could just boom go away. What would you do? What would society do if that happened? Nothing. Nothing. You know why? Because the damage has done been done. The travesty has already taken place. Now we're seeing the consequences of it. Now we're beginning to see the aftermath of the travesty that occurred going back into 1988, whenever 9 tapes went to the White House, that Ronald Reagan had an opportunity of making things right in his own consciousness with his own God. And I don't know if he was overpowered. I don't know if he was tricked. I don't know if he was poisoned. Something happened to that man to where, boom, bam, all of a sudden, he lost his mind. He had hardening of the arteries. He had dementia. And basically, the last year of Ronald Reagan's presidency was run by Nancy. How come that happened to Ronald Reagan that quickly? I mean, done been shot in 1983. He boom, bam, bounced off from that. I mean, like it wasn't nothing. And went on with his presidency. But after those 9 tapes went to the White House, and after he finally succeeded in convincing the superpowers that the world wasn't going to end by a nuclear holocaust towards the Berlin Wall falling the year after that, something happened to our American president. Just like something from within Homeland Security happened to JFK, that as far as I'm concerned, the way that they handled that after that occurred was so unprofessional, towards a cover-up on top of another cover-up on top of another cover-up, and people not having to give an accountability in what they should have been doing that they allowed to happen. I mean, how viciously blind can the American people be that did not demand for deeper investigations to happen during the process of all that is still beyond me. Still beyond me. And it's got to be the same thing that I look at today towards people being bamboozled, basically being bewitched. This supernatural entity, this evil entity that had struck a chord to the American people. And keep in mind, that was long about the time of the Beatles, long about the time of Elvis, long about the time of Woodstock, long about the time of the hippie yippie era. Long hair, beads, People were starting to get crazy. People were starting to not handle their affairs properly. I'll put it that way. And that's being very conservative with my words.
It's a deep contradiction. And I think that when the history of this period is written, we will have a lot to say about that.
No doubt.
You cannot account for some of the divisive forces at work in our country, sadly, without reference to what's happening in huge segments of the American church.
There you go.
I come out of a tradition that has always tried to use our faith to bring us together. I like the way Jimmy Carter used his faith. I like the way Martin Luther King Jr. and Ella Baker and white brothers and sisters like James Reeb in the midst of this civil rights movement, how they used their faith. and so many others in this moment.
My thanks to Senator Raphael Warnock for spending the day with me and helping me along in my shaky biking. And a special thanks to the crew at the Lee Nun Farm in Georgia. We're coming back right after a quick break. Stay with us.
And I can vouch for that faith, that if I didn't hang on to my faith during the events that I went through that was so harsh and so intense, even right here between 2014 and 2017, and then my brother dying, and less than 10 days later, I'm in jail. I'm in jail without no bail. Why the community was driving around falsely accusing me of me having sex with my brother and me killing my own brother? How freaking cold-hearted and evil-minded is that? And we're not talking about somebody that just drifted into the area. We're talking about somebody that's got deep, deep roots here, going all the way back before the Civil War. I've got seeds planted here pertaining to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers right here in this area. And I think that I had to put up with that. You know, if David Jeffrey Jackson, my younger brother, died of anything, and I've said this before, and I know a lot of people snigger at it whenever I say this, they'll laugh at it, because they're incapable of understanding what I'm saying. They're incapable. If he died of anything, he died of a heart break pertaining to his heart earning and breaking. Because he never would have thought that his own peers, his own people that he went to school with, his so-called friends, would have treated him so ugly and so badly just because his brother come back to Northwest Tennessee. And I've heard other ministers preaching on the death of Jesus Christ, that the lacerations that he got didn't kill him. The amount of blood that he lost in those lacerations didn't kill him. All the inhumane, dehumanizing factors that he had to go through pertaining to him mocking him and spitting on him and then putting a crown of thorns on him and gouging him into his skull. None of that killed him. Even hanging him on a cross and sticking spikes into his feet and his inner hands. Actually, I was told that it's in the wrist of where they put the stake at. But anyways, none of that actually killed Jesus. You know what killed Jesus? Was a broken heart. Was a broken heart that was related around whenever he went up into the mountain and looked down at Jerusalem and said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I have gathered you together as a hen would gather her chicks, and ye would not listen. I can basically say the same thing after pursuing a message in 30 years of being violated, being lied on, being basically entrapped, being put in severe circumstances. I don't think I've ever said this, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. Before Jimmy Jackson, my cousin, come to Hopkinsville, Kentucky to pick me up the day that they were supposed to have released me, because I'd made this agreement with a plea bargain deal towards them letting me out. I'd already been in there for almost a year. Once you figure out what kind of game that they're playing, ain't no need to play in the game no more, because all you're going to do is just basically rot in a cell, and ain't nobody going to give a rat's you know what about you. And if anything, they're actually going to be glad that you went ahead and croaked. Now, the jail attendants and the people in the courts, they'll deny all that. They'll say, oh, no, that wasn't our intentions. Okay, well, what was your intentions? What was your motives? I know this. Whenever I got out of jail, I walked up like 2 city blocks And the first place I found was a decent restaurant because I hadn't had a decent meal. And I guess I was being followed and didn't even know it. But I went into that restaurant. I remember I got a nice cup of coffee and a Western omelet. And whenever I went up to pay for it, the cash register said, "You don't have to pay. Your meal's already been taken care of." And she kind of looked over into the corner with her eyes, and my eyes followed her eyes, and I looked to the corner too, and I seen this individual sitting there by himself that I have no earthly idea who he was or what he was, but I guarantee you he had something to do with that jail administration up there in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where they was keeping me pertaining to Trigg County, Kentucky, that didn't have a jail. I was going through a trial. I was going through a test. And at the bottom line, they was actually hoping that I would have either messed up towards losing my cool, maybe doing something to one of the COs, getting more charges while I was in there, because it's so easy to get extra charges whenever you get in jail because you're around idiots. You're around people that's really law-breaking people. You're around rapists. You're around murderers. You're around people that don't give a damn about their own lives, much less anybody else's. I mean, they could wake up in the middle of the night and kill you or try to rape you while you're in a shower or something. I mean, people hear of horror stories going on all the time in jails. Well, guess what? They're not just stories. They're actual facts. But now society wants to put Band-Aids on that and act like, oh, that's just a tale. That's just a tale. No, it ain't a tale. No, it's not a tale. People get killed in jails. People get messed up in jails. And you can actually mess yourself up once you get in jail, because if you lose your cool with one of the CO officers, and then you got another charge. And then on top of that charge, you can get another charge. And on top of that charge, you get another charge. Well, before it's over with, you got life in prison. For what? Jaywalking. Because you was put in a very, very precarious place at a precarious time, and you didn't get the leadership coming from the Holy Spirit that was trying to guide you out of all these different circumstances. And to this day, I still give God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit 110% of my protection on that. And I can tell you other occurrences where there was a breakout in the jail, where there was a riot. And just so happens, I just got through walking out of one space into another whenever the riots all broke out. And God took care of me. I was not in that particular cell whenever all those riots took place. I mean, I can go on and on and on about different precarious places that the system has put me in, hoping for the worst. Now, you won't get none of the jail administrators or none of the probation officers or none of the people associated with law to admit to that. But they see people like me as being a menace. Dennis the Menace, a menace. Just like they seen Jesus. Jesus was a menace to the authorities in that time, in that area. And it wasn't until Jesus finally figured out, I've gathered thee together and you still ain't going to listen. So now let's go back to plan A towards what I was put here for to begin with, which was to die for mankind's sins. That's whenever he went into the temple versus going to the right. He went to the left, and whenever he went in there, he started turning over money changers, and he started getting loud, and he started showing aggression. But what topped it off was whenever he grabbed up a bullwhip and he started popping the bullwhip, because at that time a bullwhip was considered a weapon. And that's whenever the authorities said, this is it. He's went over the line. We're going to have to kill him. And that's whenever the plot come about towards having him assassinated or crucified. The rejection that Jesus got led him to his own crucifixion. It was his own people that turned his back on Christ. If you'll look throughout the Bible, in every man or woman of God that's been called of God, 9 times out of 10, it was their own people that rejected them and caused their lives to be miserable. Some of them, they even run to village, to community to make their lives miserable. What was motivating these people of doing that was going after godly people? Evil. Controlling people's emotions and basically people becoming possessed. And I know whenever you mention the word possessed, first thing people want to think of is The Exorcist, where somebody's floating in a bed and turning their heads upside down and puking up green stuff. That is all Hollywood. That has been over dramatized towards Damien and the Omen and all those other demonic figures that Hollywood has projected and put in people's minds. It's actually a way of mocking God and mocking these entities of spirits, because they actually don't perform and operate nowhere near that usually, ever. They're very slick, they're very sly, they're very clever in how that they do things. And I know that a lot of people thought, oh man, listen to this freaking story. He's saying that people around in the community started seeing his face towards Jewbee being a peeping Tom, even though I never went to nobody's house peeking in nobody's window at 60 years old or 58, whatever it was, whenever all that took place. I've got more things to do with my life other than to agitate people's lives. Once more, all the trouble was coming here to us, my brother and I, to our address right here at 430 Beach Grove Road or 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. We wasn't going out. We wasn't handing out pamphlets. We wasn't putting stuff under people's windshield wipers. We didn't have to. War had broken out in Northwest Tennessee, and the authorities sat idly by and was letting it happen. Mike Wilson, Tommy Moore, the other judges and attorneys, probation officers, and the deputies working for the sheriff's department at that time was all part of the scheme of what was happening that costed me the death of my brother. I can't pronounce it or put it in any clearer format than that. And now, it's not just, now, it just didn't happen to me, but now it's happening all over the world. Yeah, we're seeing anti-Semitisms everywhere in New York, Chicago. I mean, they're having to put out special warnings and secret, or not secret, but extra security in all these synagogues. Why do you think, let me ask my viewers that knows anything about my life at all, why do you think that the rabbi in Nashville, Tennessee, in Davidson County, after the authorities had contacted him that there was going to be a court date, you need to be in court to represent your charge that you put on Mr. Jackson, even though it was just Mr. Jackson that put out, I think at the time was either cassette tapes, it may have been DVDs, I don't know. But anyways, I put out a message. I didn't go to the church. I didn't have any kind of confrontation with nobody. I just put out a message like I'd put out messages in all these other churches. But this was one particular church that basically stood up about it. But then after they got to thinking about it, you know what? Maybe we done the wrong thing, because this man just left information out here for us to listen to. Well, they didn't represent the warrant. According to the Nashville courts, you got a right for a quick, speedy court. So they rescheduled it again. After the second time, Rabbi still didn't show up. You know why? Because he knowed, he got to thinking about it and figured out, you know what? I shouldn't have never done that. this was this man's ideology pertaining to how that he's interpreted the Bible, and it's not for me to say whether or not he's right or wrong, and it's for darn sure not for me to bring charges into his life, so I ain't going to represent the warrant. And that's what he done. He didn't represent that warrant. But you know what the judge has done? The judge that I was in front of, he said, Mr. Jackson, by law, we're supposed to throw this out, but I'm not going to throw this out. I'm going to put this on the bottom shelf. And for basically $11.29, he was basically putting me on probation. That if you so much as even get caught jaywalking in the state of Tennessee and I find out about it, I'm going to combine both charges together, which in and of itself was an illegal act. Because the judge had no reasonable reason to do that. I had been in Davidson County. I lived in Davidson County. That was the primary purpose that the warrant ever got thrown on my lap to begin with. But I didn't even have so much as a speeding ticket or a bad check or any type of complaints whatsoever, other than Homeland Security, Secret Service, in Nashville, Tennessee field office. My problems had started at the top, beginning with the 9 tapes that went to the Reagans at the White House. And now it is sifted down through various law enforcement agencies. And that's the reason why that I couldn't go nowhere, especially in the modern day of the 21st century with all these computers and internet and social media and smartphones. I could not go nowhere without being identified. And still to this day, I can't go nowhere without being identified. I don't have to drive an elaborate vehicle and have signs and waving flags in front of the public for them to know who I am. They know who I am. They know exactly who I am. Whenever that ordeal happened to me out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 2009, you know, one of the first things that I took reference to, other than the fact that I'd been railroaded by their evil, demonic law enforcement agency in that area, the same that I'd been railroaded by the Weakley County authorities here in Martin, Tennessee in 2005, and I could go on and on and on about other charges from other places too as well. One of the first things that I took notice of after I got back in my automobile and I'd lost my job and I'd already submitted 3 estimates pertaining to the city replacing my camper shell and they declined on, was no matter where I went in my automobile, people immediately started pulling out their phones and recording me. It didn't matter if I was at a gas station. It didn't matter if I was in a grocery store. It didn't matter if I was out by the park, by a lake. It didn't matter if I was wherever. Whenever they identified me, my privacy was immediately thrown completely out the door. And not only was my privacy thrown out the door, but now they're turning it into a game, a form of entertainment. Because as soon as we identify this truck or we identify this person, hey, I'm going to pull out a camera and start documenting you. And don't think that it was just at the heat of the moment of what went on in my life in 2009 out in Oklahoma. Because since then, I've had other people, even right here in Tennessee, up towards Henry County, up in other areas. Once they find out who I am, oh, they pull out a phone and start recording me. We want to know who this guy is and what he's talking about. Let's get him on film. Let's document what he's doing, where he's going, what he's saying. So my whole life has been turned totally upside down over me investigating the Davidians out in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, connected with what went on with the Oklahoma bombing. That I never should have had to have done, but because I realized that this entity, this evil entity, kept getting closer to me and kept getting closer to me, especially after 2005, whenever they done what they done up here in Martin, Tennessee, towards basically trying to turn me into a homegrown terrorist. And all I was doing was passing out Bible material pertaining to my message. If I hadn't went out and basically made a name for myself out in the ordeal with Oklahoma, though it costed me even that much more of my privacy. I think eventually they would have probably brought somebody out here that would have just executed us the same way that my brother David was talking about. That Jewbee, if all this was to have been happening along about the time of the 19th century, whenever our grandfather was hanging a bunch of people out here working for the state of Tennessee, supposedly a bunch of wild people. Using the wrong type of procedures in how that they was bringing justice to society. David said they would have done already come out here on this property and they'd have done already strung me and you up. We would be dead. We would be dead. Now that's in addition to what my brother told me prior to all that. After I come back here and I got to really dissecting towards what went on and how it went on, who said what to who, pretending how David got thrown down on his own property by 3 individuals that all belonged to the same family. His gun fell out of his pocket. The next thing you know, they grabbed up the gun and stuck it to his head and was trying to pull the trigger. And just so happens the gun had a safety feature on it to where if the clip wasn't in the gun, in which the clip fell out. Whenever it hit the ground, it fell out. David looked at me and said, Jewbee, you not only went to 1 funeral, you not only went to 2 funerals, but you would have went to 3 funerals, all within a 12-month period. So you talk about a witch hunt. I had no other choice. And thank God for social media to where I can actually put out my story and let people use their own judgment of who I am and what happened here. But I had no other choice other than after 2017, basically to dig down and hunker down. And of course, COVID hit and everybody basically dug down. And now people are starting to come out of all that. Their eyes is beginning to open in realizing how badly that the system is not only broken, but who was the ones that broken it. And they're the ones that still want to stay in power. From the judges, to the senators, to the congressmen, to the bankers, to the lawyers, the whole 9 yards, the whole shooting kabadge has been spoiled, broken. And Donald Trump's followers can see that. Now they can take things out of characteristic the way that they was doing this morning on the media. And it was MSNBC that was basically doing it, that I took notice of. That Donald Trump puts out this picture of the White House with smoke and flames coming out of both sides and said, I'm coming back to the White House to straighten this out. They took that and blowed it out of proportion and mischaracterized what his motive or what his intentions was by him saying that as a warning and not a threat. I truly believe that we're living in a society today that cannot tell the differences between a warning towards somebody putting out an advisory, kind of like the weatherman, versus somebody actually threatening them. I can verify that towards what went on right here in Martin, Tennessee, handing out Bible literature, and what went on in my life in Kentucky, up around Livingston County, Kentucky, towards me trying to warn people about major electrical disturbances that was going to occur, to what went on in other areas that basically just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. You talking about a witch hunt. Now, Donald Trump's right whenever he talks about people are on a witch hunt in trying to bury Donald Trump and put him in the imagery of being a monster. I don't agree with his tactics that he used in trying to throw the election. And there's still people out there that are thoroughly convinced that the election was stolen, that the election was thrown. I don't believe that it was. I don't think that all these states are going to come up with the same conclusion with the same amount, basically, of the votes that Donald Trump lost versus he won. He was wrong about that. Pence knows that he was wrong about that, and rather than Pence having to go through more troubles because of Donald Trump's presidency that Pence was vice president on, Pence has decided to throw in the hat and get completely out of the game because he smells a bad rat in the woodpile, and he don't want to be part of the smell. And the only way that he can think of towards getting away from the smell is getting away from the woodpile. That's probably one of the main reasons why Mr. Pence throwed in the towel. Now, he'll tell you the reason why he throwed in the towel was because he wasn't getting good supporters, financial supporters. May have been part of it. But there has to be some sort of reasonable reasoning of why that he did not get in that beast. It's called the Beast. One of the Secret Service agents' cars that they drive the president and diplomats around in. It's supposed to be bulletproof and bomb-proof and every other kind of proof. But there had to have been a reason why that man decided that day, whenever all that was going on, January the 6th of the uprising, that he did not go into that car. It's called trust. Whenever you get to the point that you can no longer trust the people that's supposed to be protecting you, because now you have seen through their smokescreen, and now you're finding out that they've done this. You got JFK, you got all these other events that's happened. It's been basically a government within a government that's been controlling the government. The puppet masters. The puppet masters has taken on a whole complete entity within the entity. And they're the ones that has driven this off into doom and gloom. And now we're seeing it on a day-to-day level, only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's not just Donald Trump that's seen it towards him wanting to build a wall to protect his own people, but it's basically been now society is waking up, and I've used this as an illustration. It's as if everybody was watching a football game. Let's say there's 100,000 people there, and all of a sudden all of them want to contest because it was a bad play, and all of them come running down to the football field at one time. That's what we're having going on right now against the broken system. That includes the bankers, that includes the big conglomerates, the corporates that's come in and taken us over. The people have lost control of this country. And now the people are trying to gain it back. And every time somebody like Donald Trump speaks out, they want to twist it around, take things out of its proper perspective, and now all of a sudden it's a threat instead of a warning. Well, that's what they've done to me. That's exactly what they've done to me. Anybody that's passing out Bible literature and gets called on the carpet to the point that the Martin PD drives all the way to Carroll County, to Huntington, Tennessee, without a legalized warrant, much less an assisted. And that's probably the reason why that they didn't call on the Carroll County Police Department in assisting them with the arrest, is because they didn't have their paperwork in order. It was a Yahoo type deal. And of course, the judges back up the police force, and it's supposed to be the other way around. It's supposed to be the police force that backs up the judges, because the judges are supposed to be doing their jobs. Well, whenever you're working as a Yahoo buddy deal type deal down here in the South, basically a backwoods court, backwoods judges, backwoods attorneys, that's what's got us in this trouble. That's what's got us in the trouble that now people are waking up to. No, I don't agree with how Donald Trump went about doing what he was doing towards trying to hang on to his power. Just like I don't agree with Timothy McVeigh and Nichols putting manure fertilizer in a truck and turn it into a bomb and killing 168 people. But once more, you got to look at all the dots and not just part of them. What caused them to do that? They was trying to vindicate the people's death of what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, knowing the details that the general public did not know at that time, pertaining to how the ATF went in there and was preying on the weak minds of people and basically sold them a bunch of guns and then turned around and busted them for it. They had no idea about any type of sexual immorality behavior going on within that camp. Because I promise you, if they did, they would have went at the warrant in that direction. And even after they had known that the Davidians was onto them towards their plans of surprise had been basically spoiled, they still went ahead and pursued it. The ATF and the FBI, the federal agencies down there, was wanting to make a big headline bust. And they made a headline, all right. Boy, did they ever. At the expense of innocent people's lives. And I'm just not talking about the lives of those that got barbecued that day, pertaining to the Davidians, the children, the women. But I'm also talking about those that died during the Oklahoma bombing. That our government to this day still has not come clean on that ordeal. Just like our government to this day still has not come clean in how that they have failed the American people. They keep talking about, oh, we're going to shut the government down. Oh, we're going to shut the government down. Oh, then they'll raise the debt ceiling. How many times has the debt ceiling been raised now since the 80s? Over 70 times. Right now, the United States government is spending $5 trillion, but only bringing in $3 trillion. If you're bringing in $3 trillion and you're spending $5 trillion, what does that mean that's going to happen to the purse? Purse is going to go away. Instead of you having money in the purse, you're going to be broke. And then you'll go from broke to be indebted to whoever that you're broke to. That's why the people are still supporting Donald J. Trump. They're not stupid. The public has smartened up towards what the hell has happened and what is happening. They can read through the final lines. There's no doubt Donald Trump done a lot of stupid things. He said a lot of stupid things. He really did. Especially whenever you go to degrading third world countries and calling them slums and all this other stuff and some of the other remarks that he made. But then again, you got to look at the good parts of what that he done with our military towards giving them access to have open doctors and et cetera, et cetera. You can't just look at part of the dots. You got to look at all the dots. Don't just look at part of the truth, but let's look at all the truth. That's supposed to be what our courts is about, right? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God? That pretty well covers it on all angles. You're not supposed to just look at one or two of the dots. That's like racial profiling. If you're black, it means you must be a bad person. Pull him over, he's black. But yet, no, we'll allow for 2 million illegal immigrants to come into this country and invade our land the way that we have? Come on, give me a damn break. This thing is on its way down, and everybody and their brother knows it. But then you have people that get up there and lie and manipulate the truth, or manipulate somebody's incentives towards what they intended to do and what their incentives, what their motives was, and they try to get up there and manipulate it towards trying to cover up their own bad habits or their own mistakes. The people have smartened up. I knew that whenever I went in 1995 doing auto body work, working for Jerry Smith's Body Shop, to going to Jackson, Tennessee, working for Steve Hardy, Collision Specialist Body Shop, whenever Steve Hardy was already on to the public towards taking a picture every piece and part of that automobile, including the pot seed holes that was in the seats where the pot blowed up and the seed caused a little bit of a fire, and now it's hurt their upholstery, that he went in thoroughly, identified every little crack, every little dent, every little scratch, every little defect. That way he could build a case on that automobile. That way whenever the owner of the vehicle got in the vehicle and they come back and say, well, there wasn't no burn holes in my seat. Where'd these come from? There wasn't no scratch in my right bumper. How'd that get there? The public has become so manipulative. Liars, scam artists, con artists, to where now you got to basically walk around with a GoPro in front of you and behind you and basically document every freaking thing that gets said and done. And even at that, they still, if it goes before the right people, kind of like what went on with me in Wheeling, West Virginia, if it goes in front of the right people, it don't matter if you got documentation of it or not. We're still going to put you through the meal, Mr. Jackson. You're fixing to go somewhere where we're going to punish you. And hopefully you get in there and say the wrong things to the wrong people, and they'll basically do the rest of our jobs for us. And they'll consider you being insane, and they'll institutionalize you, and we won't never have to worry about you again, or people like you again. That was their whole soul motive, purposes, and the reason why that they wanted to do away with him, away with him, is what that they were saying during the trial of Jesus. Now, there's no doubt Jesus was challenging the system, because the system deserved to be challenged during the time that Jesus come forth. But I haven't been challenging the system. A matter of fact, I've been standing true to the authentic old system that I had no idea that had been broken this badly until I started having confrontations. And one of the first ones that really woke me up was the confrontation with the Paducah feds whenever I went in front of a federal judge. And he had no other choice but to compliment me after the 6 months of me going to MCC in downtown Chicago, being studied by Dr. Dana and his team members. The federal judge got penalized, got punished because of that, because it wasn't long until he was no longer that federal judge in that district. The system is only as good as the people that puts the people in power that's in control of the system. It's the same way with the church. The church is only established by the church members. Whenever the church members become so corrupt that they're voting in corrupt deacons and voting in corrupt preachers, just like the Catholic Church with all the corruption going on with the priests, with all the pedophiles, it begins at the bottom and goes to the top on certain levels whenever it comes to our system. But whenever the system is broke, the system is going to attack the innocent lives of people. And that's what the system is doing to Donald Trump. And like I said, I don't agree with how he tried to basically go up against the system the way that he did in challenging the system, and that's exactly what he was doing. He was challenging the system. I don't agree. I do agree with the fact that he got a right to challenge the system. I just don't agree with how he went about challenging the system towards pumping everybody up and misleading the public the way that he did. And I think that no matter how much that him and his party wants to deny that, I think now that society's basically waking up to that. But at the same time, society really don't have no other choice, because now society has been pushed off in this corner and choosing between the lesser of the two evils over here in America. And they for darn sure don't want to go with Biden because of his age and the fact that he has not been doing his job appropriately whenever it comes to catering to everybody and their brother, rather than catering to his own people and allowing for all these illegal immigrants to steadily be pouring over here into America. So whenever you get to looking at the public is caught. They've been captured because now their knowledge has expanded. Now they're very knowledgeable of the things that's been going on in and with the system. There's been only one person that's actually challenged the system, which has been Donald Trump. And because of the rich and the powerful, the conglomerates, they're going to make sure that the right person don't get back in front of them cameras again, to the point of doing destruction into their own lives. Because why? Because they're taking care of their own. Birds of a feather flock together. The rich are going to back up the rich. And it don't matter how rich or how corrupt that they got or how that they got there, they're still going to back up one another because they know that there's unity in numbers. Well, now their unity is breaking apart because now they're seeing what's been going on with the system, especially with the Democrat system. But I can point my finger directly at the Republican system because they was the ones that took this thing off on the frenzy in America going to the far left whenever it should have went to the far right during Ronald Reagan's administration. I can take the dots and line them all up together. And there's nothing wrong with my memory. I promise you, there's nothing wrong with my memory going all the way back. And now I've got Google and data that I have created, or not created, but documented because of various speeches and various people saying various things. And I can prove my case. But do I still have a movement in Northwest Tennessee? Nope. So as I watch these things untangle, as I watch this runaway train, I really don't have no other choice than to stand in the corner and say, nanny, nanny, boo-boo, which may not be right, but it wasn't right in how that they thought that they was going to manipulate the people and basically burying me towards these monsters, trying to put out to society that I was the monster, and the whole time they was the monsters because proof is in the pudding in their failures. We didn't have to have flight marshals in all these airplanes until after 9/11. We didn't have to have all this extra security in all these schools until all these vigilantes went on the warpath. We didn't have to have all this extra security pertaining to Jewish centers, synagogues, all over America. I mean, they got one of the best synagogue centers over in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It's kind of down in an area that it's not really what you'd call the predominant area, but there's a lot of good people in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma that are Jewish descent. Just like there's good Jewish people all over America, period. Now, there's some bad ones. There's some bad ones. But there's also a great deal of good ones. And they have the love in their heart. The only thing that I don't agree with the true Orthodox Jew is that they still, the majority of them, has not accepted the Lord Jesus Christ towards actually being God's only begotten Son. That's the only thing that I got against them. Other than that, you will find some of the most decentest, kindest, politest people in the world. Like I said, I'm sure there's some bad apples out there, but you can't judge everything off of a few. And that's what the world's basically doing right now. They're standing up against the godly, the anointed. And if you think that you're going through hard times right now, regardless of what country or what continent you may be on, you let this thing continue to unfold the way that it's unfolding. And it may take another 6 months to a year, but the trajectory that we're on right now is hard times are coming, and already has come in a lot of different circles in a lot of different countries. Not just the Ukrainians, not just the Middle East, but it's also hitting Africa, South America, Mexico. All these other countries are suffering. They may not be suffering as bad as the Ukrainians or the people in the Middle East, but they're suffering. And their suffering is only going to get worse rather than it getting better. The supply lines are going to get worse. Whenever you no longer having Mother Nature cooperating with humanity, and now humanity is turning against humanity, you got a formula of what? Catastrophe. And that's the trajectory that the Luciferian Lucifer, their head man, Lucifer himself, has planted in the hearts and minds of the wicked, and that is the trajectory that we are on right now. And if you can't see that, then obviously either you don't care to see it or you're incapable of seeing it. But there are people out there that can see it, and those are the people that's standing up, and those are the people that's saying, we don't care. We don't care. We're going to choose between the lesser of the two evils, and this is their better choice out of the two. Now I'm talking frank here. I'm not telling you how I feel about politics. I'm telling you how certain people feel about politics. And the younger generation, especially with all the jobs going south, with all these retail stores that's basically stabbed their own people in the back. Now you got all these factories with all these empty hulls. You don't think that this has affected people's lives in seeing all the corruption and all the violence in all these streets and all the homeless? The rich is still trying to take care of the rich, regardless of how they got rich. They're still trying to take care of the rich. But now, the working class, the poor class is starting to stand up. And they're starting to resist them. And they don't like that. And whenever they see somebody like Trump, they're going to go after him. Or they see somebody like me, we ain't going to support that man. We're not going to support that man. Now, they've been smart enough for the past year or two to back off. They're not coming at me or after me the way that they was. But that still doesn't mean that there's not going to be trickery. There's still not going to be, that there's going to be entrapments going to be laid, pretending to booby traps, that they're going to put out landmines, hoping that I'll stand on one of them and blow up on. That's what they've been doing all along. They've been hoping that I would just up and die, go away. And I'm still living, and I'm still talking, and I'm still making videos. And I have no one to thank for that other than God Almighty, the Lord Jesus Christ, and the precious Holy Spirit.
A very good day to all of you from MSNBC World Headquarters here in New York. Welcome everyone to Alex Witt Reports. We're beginning the hour with breaking news, a deadly U.S. military training mission. NBC's Aaron Gilchrist is at the White House for us. Aaron, welcome. So the president, we know, just released a statement. Tell us about that and all we know about this incident.
Yeah, Alex, the White House putting out this statement from President Biden in the last hour or so. The president saying that he and the First Lady are mourning the deaths of 5 American service members who died when their aircraft crashed in the Mediterranean Sea during a routine training mission. Now, we know U.S. European Command says the service members were killed during that routine air refueling mission. It says that was part of military training Friday evening in the Eastern Mediterranean. Officials say the aircraft had a mishap and that caused it to go down. The initial military statement did say that this was purely related to training and that there's no indication of hostile activity there in the Mediterranean. The president's statement going on to say that he acknowledges that service members put their lives on the line for our country every day. He said that on this Veterans Day weekend, he again affirms what he calls the sacred obligation to those who volunteer to serve, as well as their families, their caregivers, and supporters. That echoes really the message he delivered yesterday at Arlington National Cemetery, Alex, about caring for these people during and after their service.
And it's not just the people that's basically veterans or been involved with the military directly, but it's also the teachers, the instructors, the evangelists, the missionaries, people working for nonprofits pertaining to Red Crosses and mercy ship people that does stuff for people that's all banged up and bruised up and messed up. Hospitals. I could go on and on about people that are part of the system that keeps the system going the way that it's supposed to go. I'm not saying that everybody in the government is corrupt. I'm just saying that there's been enough of them that's been corrupt for the past 25 or 30 years that now we're seeing the repercussions of, and if we're not smart enough to pull ourselves out of this hole, just like I asked somebody the other day, with us being already $33 trillion, let's say that there was a major event that took place worldwide, globally, and don't think for a second that our enemy don't know this. Could we even afford to go to battle the way that our previous ancestors did during World War II? There comes a time of borrowing from Paul, knowing that you're never going to be able to pay Paul back to pay Peter. There comes a time to where you can print up all the money you want in the Denver printing presses, but once you exceed what, it's kind of like pulling a rubber band. A rubber band will only pull so far until it pops. And that is what people are seeing. And we're trying to prevent it from happening, but I guess the evil and the demonic people, the rich and the powerful and the elites, they're dead set towards wanting to bring this chaos into even a more chaotic state. That way it'll make it that much more confusing. That way they're hoping that they'll be able to wiggle and worm their way out of accountability whenever all total hell busts loose in this country. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. And the representative in Texas, whenever the big cold front come down there and it froze all their lines and shut down their factories and shut their grid systems down, that wound up in Cancun, Mexico, I guarantee you, if something like that was to occur, we would have our own politicians that would be abandoning us, getting on their private airplanes and going to other countries until things finally settle down. Now, these are the people that's in power. These are the people that the people have put in power. And until the right people understands that and gets these people out of those powerful positions and the right people in those powerful positions, we're going to continue to deal with this circus of chaos that is only increasing rather than decreasing. It's actually getting worse. And I don't think nobody can argue that fact. But that's what they're hoping. You know, if you get to looking at the fine print in everybody's insurance claims pertaining to their homeowner's insurance, if there's ever a major calamity that happens in America to the point that houses start getting burnt, buildings start getting torn apart or blown up, basically a war, your insurance carrier does not have to protect you. Boy, wouldn't that be one of the escape artists of all time to plan out a major event like that? That way it would be so chaotic, wouldn't nobody be held accountable. Now you're talking about a travesty on top of a travesty. And that's what they're aiming for. And if we don't watch, is going to occur. That way, nobody gets held accountable. That's what they're aiming for. And a lot of them will say that, well, no, we ain't aiming for that. Consciously, maybe you're not. But subconsciously, there's so many people out there that's working off of the ill will of their own emotions, and their emotions are in the wrong, being generated from the wrong spirit. And a lot of people does things and says things to people subconsciously that after they get through doing what they've done, they get to thinking about it. My God, how in the world did I ever push myself to that point that I allowed myself to do that or say that? It's because you wasn't of the right spirit, and you allowed for that demonic spirit to possess your emotions and possess your inner being to the point that it overtook you. It overtook you, and you acted subconsciously. That's why it is imperative for the true Christians today to act within the guidelines and the power of the Holy Spirit, because it's only going to be the Holy Spirit that guides you in what to say and when to say it and how to say it. And it specifically talks about that in the Bible, that some of you will be thrown into prison. Some of you will even be put to death. It talks about how that it not beeth you that speaketh, but the Spirit within you that speaketh whenever you get into these situations. You have to be grounded. You have to be committed. You have to be sold out to God. Whenever you wind up getting tempted or tried or entrapped or whatever. And I've seen so many of the Christian society out there fail because they did not stay humble before the Father in either controlling their tongue or controlling their emotions. Now, we live right here in Northwest Tennessee within about 2 hours from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. There's been incidences pertaining to accidents, helicopter accidents, whatever, that's routinely going to happen in the process of training. There's been other incidences that's happened within our own military where people has wigged out. One of them was a psychiatrist, I think down in Texas, that wound up taking a handgun and shooting a bunch of people. These are all cracks. Some of the cracks are unpreventable. Some of the cracks need to be prevented. It all goes back to the leadership of those that's not doing their jobs. Now, I don't know what the failure was on this particular situation, but I'm sure it'll be investigated thoroughly. And whether or not it be weather related, maybe it was too much wind, maybe they shouldn't have been out there to begin with that day, I don't know. Or whether or not it was failure with the communications, or failure with the equipment, or failure with the people that was actually involved in the process of them doing what they was doing out there. But I'm sure to be investigated, and there'll be a final conclusion on it, because that's families pertaining to those that recently died, that now our military is going to have to walk up and knock on their door towards being the bad news bearer and saying, this is what happened. This is what occurred. But my point is this, in me saying all this, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way, because the way things are escalating, the way that they're escalating all over the world, I'm just afraid that this is just going to be a prelude of what to expect within the next few months and possibly the next few years, especially if we don't get a handle on what the hell's going on, regardless whether what's going on with the Russian government pertaining to Putin, or with what the hell's going on with Hamas over in the Middle East, and God only knows how many other actors over there that are just as bad, if not worse, than that guy is, that this is just a tinderbox waiting to be ignited. And I don't know. It may have already been ignited. May not be nothing we can do other than grin and bear it now. Deal with it appropriately. But by seeing accidents in our own military does hurt me. And it does affect me tremendously towards a broken heart, towards those that sacrificed what they sacrificed for our great nation. For our great nation. But what even breaks my heart even more so is knowing the fundamentals of why it's occurring and who should be held accountable because of it occurring. That still to this day has not gotten closure in these matters. In other words, we still got the same person running the conductor as well as the caboose of the runaway train that we've never got smart enough to get them people out. That way maybe we can prevent from the train from wrecking.
I tell you, that is hard news to digest, and we're going to bring you more on it as we get more information. Aaron, though, thank you very much from the White House. Let's go now to the other breaking news on Israel's continued bombardment of Gaza following the horrific attack October 7th. And new talk today of hostages taken by Hamas and whether a deal to release them may be in the works.
But the minute we started the ground operation, things began to change.
So is there a potential deal,
pressure.
Mr. Prime Minister? Is there a potential deal?
There could be, but I think the less I say about it, the more I'll increase the chances that it materializes.
We are working literally by the hour, Jonathan, to try to secure the release of all the hostages. I really don't want to get into too much detail because, again, the less said publicly about these sensitive negotiations and conversations, probably the better.
Well, NBC News is reporting separately. A Biden administration official confirmed a possible deal for the release of hostages is in fact being discussed. It would see the release of about 80 women and children in exchange for the release of Palestinian women and teenagers held by Israel. Also new today, a bipartisan group from Congress met with Netanyahu, as well as other Israeli and U.S. officials in Israel. They are now returning to Washington. And with just 5 days to go before a government shutdown, and where Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson plans to introduce a two-step continuing resolution to keep the U.S. government open, it includes no aid to Israel. Let's go right now to NBC's Julie Sirkin, joining us from her post on Capitol Hill with new reaction to the House Speakers. I guess it's a two-step approach, Julie, to avert a government shutdown. So the big question is the plan DOA or will it work?
Well, Alex, I don't think so. I was talking to a senior Senate Democratic leadership aide late last night after this plan was dropped, and they made a point of telling me that they feel as though Speaker Johnson came closer into the direction of Democrats with this bill because it does have this two-step process. Democrats certainly don't like it. They think it's chaotic, it's wonky, it's complicated for no reason, but it is a clean bill, meaning there are no spending or budget cuts, something hardline conservatives really want.
Once more politics. They've driven this thing off into calamity because somebody fell asleep at the job. Somebody had it on cruise control too long. Somebody had it on automatic pilot while the rest of us was asleep and not paying attention to these activities that's now consequently got us all in trouble. Boy, oh boy, so many different twists and turns, just a tangled web that they're weaving right now, knowing good and well that they have failed the people. They have failed the people in protecting them, not only domestically, but also internationally. My God, what a mess. I just told somebody last night, talking about all the illegals coming over here to America on the Mexican border, that people like Davy Crockett and other people like that are rolling around in their graves. Rolling around in their graves, wondering why and how this has occurred. Just an endless cycle. It's a cesspool of negativity. It's a cesspool of failure. And then they'll pop up certain people and try to make them look like, oh, they're the heroes. Unbelievable.
The sounds of explosions, the sounds of bombardments. It didn't sound like it was very far away. He said that they're running out of food, they're running out of water, and critically, they're running out of fuel, so much so that at least 16 patients, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, have died as a result of a lack of supplies in that hospital alone, including at least 3 prematurely born babies. Now, the Israeli military says that they are facilitating an evacuation of the hospital. They're saying that they dropped about 300 liters of fuel outside the hospital gates. The doctor acknowledging that they did receive that fuel, but also noting that while they received 300 liters of fuel this morning, they need 10,000, and that no one has been allowed to leave the hospital.
And Aaron, quickly here, where are we on a possible deal with release of more hostages still being held in Gaza?
Well, on Meet the Press, the Israeli Prime Minister said that a deal was possible. An official within the Biden administration.
We just heard all that. We just heard all that. Let's listen to our Tennessee representative here, one of them. See what she's got to say. Sometimes our politicians in Tennessee does make a little bit of sense. Especially whenever it comes to all the illegal trade.
Trump lawyers say Eric and the former president likely
all the illegals coming over here to America.
Entirely pinned all of their blame on the accountants at the Trump organization. Joining me now, MSNBC legal analyst and former assistant Watergate prosecutor Jill Wine-Banks to talk more about this. Jill, as always, it is fantastic to talk to you. So kind of give me a 30,000 foot above view of what you were looking at, especially as the defense begins their case. First witness out of the gate, Donald Trump Jr.
As you said, they are going to be blaming someone else. That's typical of what Donald Trump and his family do. It's not us, it's someone else. But
it's a blame game on both sides. I don't even want to listen to no more of this. I pretty well know what she believes in and what side that she's on, and how that she's degraded this one and protected her own party and all this other stuff. I don't want to listen to this. Because it's both parties' fault. It's a blame game. And in the process of the blame game, you know who actually gets hurt? We the people. Their pocketbooks are still going to be full at the end of the day. They're still going to have their nice bank accounts. They're still going to have their nice automobiles. They're still going to have their nice homes and their luxury homes and their vacation homes and their yachts and all the etc. So they can get up there and squall and bawl, and they can play both sides against the middle all they want. But people like me is on to them. It's a diversion, a distraction. You're going to rob the bank on one end of the town. You go the opposite end of town. You catch something on fire or you blow something up. You create a diversion. That way, when everybody's going in one direction, the bank robbers are going in the opposite direction towards doing their deeds. It's been going on for thousands of years. The slip of the hand. The puppet master. The great Czar in behind the Zorro in behind the curtain. The great Oz. And if people can't see that, and I know that they can. There are certain people out there that are waking up to all this. But are they going to be waking up to it too late? Kind of like waking up to the fact of the environmental global warming. Have we awaken too late? That's the million-dollar question. Good luck to all of us. God bless our troops the day after Veterans Day. God bless our military. God bless our troops. God bless America. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on. The only thing that I can do is just pray for the situation over in the Middle East, pray for the Ukrainians, pray for the Americans, pray for the Africans, pray for the people in all the other parts of the world, that God's holy, eternal will be done no matter what. No matter what. Father God, we want to pray, Lord, a special prayer for our military, for those that are right now presently serving, or those that are contemplating towards serving. Because, Lord, without them, we are doomed. I know that it's not the first choice in having such of a strong military stance, but I also know that sometimes good people has to use bad measures just to protect the good people that are still good. We are reaching a pivotal point right now with not only our endeavors towards our open republic democracy, but we're also seeing all these other things that's unfolding. I just pray, God, that you would take the initiative to take in charge of these people's lives that are in charge of our lives, and that you will either straighten them out or get them out. Straighten them out or get them out for the benefit of the people. Especially the Christian people, the good, sound, moral Christian people up into this planet. I just pray, Father God, that your will be merciful to all of those that's suffering in such of a degree that the hand of Satan has come down and brought this type of misery into our lives. And it's just not pertaining to the wars, but other miseries all over the planet. Such hardships has fallen up into people's lives. I just pray, Father God, that you, Lord, will comfort them in this time of need. Pray, eternal God, for your forgiveness. Pray, Lord, that you will lead us not into temptation, but you will deliver us from this evil. And we ask all these things in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. For it's only in him and by him that we give all glory and honor pertaining to your gracious Holy Son. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to continue to thank you for the things that you are doing and the things that we believe that you're going to do towards one day seeing true peace, utopia, towards the meek inheriting the earth. In your Holy Son's name I ask, in Jesus Christ's name, amen. Good luck to us all. Heaven help us all in this spiritual warfare. Shalom.